Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindful Leadership Beyond Borders. I am Betska, the Guru Coach from Vancouver Island, Canada, and my co-host Raj Vashisht is from Delhi, India. And we welcome today Kenny Stoddart. And what a history this guy has. Let me give you a short introduction of him. He's the founder and CEO of IronMind Advisors. Just that title alone must make you intrigued, right? Iron Mind. How do you have an iron mind, right?
Hmm.
He's creator of the Identity Gain OS and the Athlete Check ecosystem. Kenny now coaches high performance leaders, athletes, and teams to reclaim their identity. Fascinating phrase there. Reclaim their identity, build resilience, and elevate their potential. He's completing his MA in clinical mental health counseling and speaks nationally on identity, performance, and leadership. Based in Jacksonville Beach, Florida, lucky guy, Kenny blends elite athletic grit, executive clarity, and deep human insight to help people transform the way they see themselves and the way they lead. You know, as I was introducing you, Kenny, I remembered a client I had because I'm roughly in the same field that you're in.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
this young lady came to me. She was an athlete, and she was hoping to, win big at the Olympics and so on and so forth. And she told me the story about her coach, who was um, he basically made her cry every day
Oh my goodness.
by telling her how lousy she was
Oh
and just
my
he
goodness.
he he beat her down instead of lifting her up, and she just sat in my office and cried and cried. I mean, this coach was a first rate, highly recognized coach in the athletic world, and when she told me what was happening to her, I was kind of shocked. It took me quite a while, a few sessions to calm her down and believe in herself again. So,
Imagine.
what do you think of that story, Kenny? I know it's quite an opening to to
Well,
our
first
podcast, but
first and foremost, thank you for the beautiful introduction, and it's great to be here with you both. That is not Iron Mind approved, if I would say that
okay,
style
yeah,
whatsoever. Quite the opposite. And I know if we're going to start there, so the Iron Mind is built on grace and gratitude. So those two things don't apply to the story that you just mentioned. And when I
mm,
say that, the Iron Mind is um, obviously I'm very fond of it because I created it, if you will, not through my own rocket science or anything, but essentially how it, I'm an Ironman triathlete. So that takes incredible mental fortitude.
yeah,
Retired professional triathlete. I should say I was an Man triathlete. I don't do that anymore because of it's hard and whatever. There's a lot of
right,
reasons, but the mental fortitude that it takes is one big, huge component of what I talk about every day. And then,
mm,
that iron, that physical side of things to be able to endure, but the grit and then the mind, like you mentioned, I'm back in school for mental health and the mental side of things is where I work with athletes and founders and of executives of all sorts because as you mentioned, I'm identity driven with my approach and I help people reclaim theirs or maintain theirs and or not lose it like I did. But none of it is with making anybody cry. It's actually opposite because I love, and again, I know that you were just sharing that story because I've heard similar
mm,
stories. Like there's not the first
mm,
that story is, quite frankly, it happened to me. It was very common back in when I was in the 80s playing hockey, not necessarily to make you
wow,
cry or
was it
anything.
really? That was
No, no,
common
no,
back
I
then?
shouldn't say that. But coaching
Common,
has
yeah,
changed where sensitivity
yeah,
is a much bigger factor. And, but
right,
let's put it this way. That story, we've heard it too many times where there's coaches that have
mm,
that style that make people want to quit their sport or feel just like so everything that I stand for at the athlete check and the mental health side of things is completely against all of that. But again, uh, grace and gratitude is where I start. I like to think about what we're doing. Our past, we all have them.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are better than others. Some of them are rockier than others, but we can't change them, but we can control the future. So as we talk a little bit more, you'll hear how I talk about identity loss versus identity gain because I like to talk about going
Mm-hmm.
up, not down, or going, forward, not backwards. And I will never
Mm-hmm.
say let's dismiss our past or no, 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 no. I dismissed my past for a long time, and unfortunately, that was something that I had to catch up with over the years. But I like to start with thinking about how great people are and reminding them because that's one of the things that I run into all the time is that there's not enough of that grace and gratitude, reminding even young athletes of what they accomplished at such a young age. Like this young lady that was in your office, she probably had an incredible history based on the where she was in the sport,
Mm-hmm.
and but she was thinking that she wasn't good enough, and I
Yeah,
can't, I don't.
yeah. She was on the floor crying. He was
Yeah.
beating her up, kind of idea. Excuse me, Raj. Raj, you may or may not know, is an athlete himself, right? He works out all the time, and
Hmm.
he has quite a following in his gym. So, Raj, what questions or comments do you have from Kenny right off the bat here? What would you like to say about being an athlete and what you've had to endure and how you have become successful?
You're right. The positive attitude and grateful behavior
Mm-hmm.
and past has gone. So we cannot change past. So why
Uh,
not we should grateful for the past for better learning and creating our new version. I always
aha.
thought I always thought past has gone and sometime when we are in gym or like playing anything, so some people like coach, some senior, some colleague, they have habit to criticize, degrade. You
Yeah.
can't do, you don't have ability, you are weak, you are this, that, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
but that situation, we need to control our mindset. That is very important. And
And you're right. And this is something that I work with my student athletes with all the time, the mindset, because, you know, this is, as I mentioned earlier, I growing up in Buffalo, Western New York, on the just south of Ontario, which you're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
I started playing hockey when I was 3 years old. I was a great hockey, not great, but I was a good hockey
Wow.
player for the area. And I played all the way till I was 17 years old, and that was my identity. Um, and then hockey
Mm,
was over, right? Hockey became
mm,
came to a screeching halt, and that was a shock to my system as a young man. And athletes face that every day, and that's a huge, they've played hockey or soccer or whatever sport that it is, figure skating, like you mentioned, for their whole since they were kids. They've been coached, they've been criticized, that they become good, and then all of a sudden they're not good enough anymore because of they're growing or they're not growing or their school didn't get it. And it leaves these young student athletes many times shattered or confused. And this happened to me, and that's why I mentioned I like to work with the younger generation the way I give back, because that haunted me for many years, and I didn't properly deal with it. It wasn't a big deal that my hockey career came to an end because it wasn't going anywhere, quite frankly. It was just more of a mental thing for me that I wasn't prepared to deal with at that age. So when
mm.
I deal with
Okay.
student athletes who are, burnt out or facing, just overwhelmed with school and sport, and they're wondering how they're going to keep going and stuff, we have to remind them, like Raj said, about, the mental side of it, and giving themselves a mental break instead of, just a physical break. Like, y- give yourself some grace and gratitude. I always say it's such a beautiful thing because I didn't really know what that was as a high achiever myself, and like a
Mm,
high like triathlete where like there was no grace and you had to just go and grind and train. And
mm-hmm.
but when I learned what those two words really truly meant, it takes such a weight off of your shoulders because if we're grateful for the health that we have to be able to perform a sport or work out or go to
Mhm.
work, these things start to change the perspective, the mindset of why we're doing it. Obviously, like I'm a competitor. I like to win, but we can keep that in perspective too, right? I wanted to win every race that I was in, but that's impractical. So instead of getting upset or whatever, it was more about learning or how can we grow.
Right.
And you know, th for the younger generations, I think that especially the elites, teenage athletes, and they're expected to go and get now contracts for money in the NCAA and whatnot. So
Mhm. Mhm.
there's relentless pressure on these young people, and
Yeah.
when it doesn't work out, I want to be the guy that's there saying, you're still amazing. You're still, just because you're not a great lacrosse or a hockey player anymore doesn't mean you're not, wildly intelligent and, a great personality and proper and, a gentleman or a lady. Like you have all of these great characteristics. You were the captain of your team. Let's transform that into amazing things when you go to college and be a leader. Be a, you know, set the tone for your group, and those are the things
Mhm.
that all right, I can do this, and that's you know what kind of motivated me once I took my jersey off, if you will, is like I'm going to go lead in other ways now, and I
Mhm.
did went to military college and then became a leader forever in my professional life, in the cybersecurity world. But um, I didn't know all the lessons that I'm talking about now when I was 24 as a young leader managing a team. And that's exactly what I do. When people say, "Well, what do you do? How do you work with these young men and women?" I'm like, "Well, I want them to be really prepared for what actually is going to happen when,
So,
they show up for
yeah.
their first day."
So, excuse me for interrupting, but
Yeah.
both of you are talking about one word, um, which is identity.
Yeah. That's
And
everything comes back to identity.
yeah, so why is identity, in your opinion, the single most important variable in human performance?
Bec-
Tell us.
This is I can't wait to tell you because and I'll start from when I graduated from college in 1997, I went to the Citadel. It's a military college in South Carolina. And there's this
Hmm.
ongoing joke that when you graduate from the Citadel, a lot of the cadets will run across the parade deck and either go to the chapel to get married to their sweetheart, or they will go into the military and be an officer and an incredible leader, or go into the real world and get a job. And I went in, I was not going to get married. I wasn't go My military was done. So I went and I got in the elevator and I went up to the seventh floor and I got off the elevator and it was like work, because that's what we were supposed to do. I was 23. I was a college graduate. And my work, that floor that I got off on, was the internet security floor, it's called the identity loss floor. So I went as a 22-year-old, 17 days after graduation, started my first job in identity loss, meaning I was helping
Mm.
protect people's identity from online fraud and credit card scams. And I
Ah.
worked for some of the biggest companies like Symantec and VeriSign and GeoTrust over the years. And I spent 27 years in that space. And you know
Mm-hmm.
what I became Ken, the cybersecurity executive. And
Mm.
fast forward 27 years, and that became my identity. And I did not know who I was as a human being. I did not. I became wrapped up in chasing quotas and making money and being the top achiever and being the fastest promoted. Meanwhile, I left a lot of sacrifice behind, and because I lost my identity for the wrong reasons. And then what that ultimately caused me was I burnt out. And I say that
Mm.
term very seriously because a lot of people say, "Hey, burnt out, that's funny." For me, it wasn't funny at all. It was devastating. I had horrible issues with alcoholism that I addressed. I mentioned I was diagnosed with cancer, which is not directly related, but certainly my health was diminishing at a rapid rate. I was a fraction of who I was. I was burnt out. I lost my identity. And then
Mm.
I decided to fix it. This is now 2 years ago. I said, enough is enough. and instead of being Superman wearing the cape all the time, I asked for help. Like I mentioned to you before, and by asking for help, I was pointed in the right direction to understand why some of these things were happening to me. And I ended up getting so much help that I went back to school to be a helper. I mean, truly. But
Yeah.
was and what I mean by that is I went to recovery. I went to Hazelden, and when I was there, um I was greeted by some of the most amazing people in the world that didn't know me. They were strangers, and they just wanted me to get better, and they worked with me, and I kind of really grasped it and realized that like I want to get better too. And I truly did. I did not want to be the human that I had become. That's identity loss. I hated that human. I truly hated him because of what he had. Again, I'm not getting, I don't want to get too far out there, but so when I started to get help and realizing that I'm not that person, and I'm starting to feel better about myself, and I immediately gravitated towards helping people regain their identity, whether it was in therapy and now in my new career or in school or anything. So that is what I call regaining your identity, and why identity is truly the most amazing thing, because when you recapture like me, like what the version of yourself that you're talking to now, Kenny Stoddart from IronMind Advisors, this is me operating at 100%, where I am so in line with who I want to be identity wise that it's a it's 70% better than the person that I was 3 years ago. So that's just me. But if you apply this approach to a team and you make minimal 3-5% increases, the results are amazing. That's why when I say it's the most powerful leadership tool, it's because no one's been able to measure it in the past. But now with AI, we get to the system learns what drives us every day. So I don't have to wait 5 years for a new manual to come out about a leadership style. I know that if someone's showing signs of fatigue on a regular basis and they've been traveling 40 weeks a year, they're on the verge of burnout. And I'm not creating anything that
Yeah.
anybody doesn't know there, but I have 8 of these different things that are important to me. And when they're operating at a high level and your identity is where it's at, you're like Raj, who loves his identity, his hair color, his spirit, his culture. He probably show and like you, doing what you do now, talking about your last 2 weeks and how happy, like that's identity driven happiness that is so much more powerful than a person that is struggling with burnout or not, operating at their max because they're not, I use the example, they're in sales, but they should be in marketing. That's generic. But in reality, like I say, I got off on the identity loss floor. I should have got off on the identity gain floor 27 years ago. It would have saved me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's why it's so powerful. And whether it's a room or any an individual, even the best people, like I've had some of the finest leaders take my identity gain assessment and I say finest, they're finest in my eyes. They've led me. And we all have gaps, right? We all
Yep.
have areas that we can make improvements on, whether it's, again, there's 8 different things, but this happens for anybody, the student athlete, for Raj in Delhi, India, or I think, did he say Delhi or
Yes. Delhi.
Delhi?
Delhi. Yep.
Or you in Vancouver Island? If we are operating at a slightly different uh, percentage with our identity, your whole day changes. You get so much more done, and it's not asking you to go and be on it's asking you to be the true version of yourself. And I
Yeah.
found a way to help people get there. They're like, well, this is me. No, it's not you, because that happened to me, right? I was there.
Yeah.
I'm not a
Well, listen, Kenny.
cybersecurity sales guy anymore.
No, that's for sure. Listen, let's take a brief pause. And when
Okay.
we come back, I would really like us to explore how someone can develop an iron mind. I think that's amazing. So, folks, we'll be
Yeah.
right back. Yeah.
All right.